Namaste and greetings. I, Karnika Arun, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Today, we are gathered for a special lecture on the topic Disaster Reduction in India, Recent Lessons and Strategies for the Future by Professor Anil K. Gupta. This deliberation is a part of the State of Environment #Planet Talks, which is organized by the IMPRI Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development. As the speaker for today's talk, we have Professor Anil K. Gupta, who is the Head of Division, International Cooperation, Advisory Services, E-Learning and Media Portfolio, Director of Projects and COE, Full Professor of Policy Planning and Strategies, National Institute of Disaster Management, New Delhi. We welcome you, sir.
So, thank you.
As the moderator, we have Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director, IMPRI, New Delhi. We welcome you, ma'am. The discussants who will be joining this session are Himanshu, Shekhar, Mishra, who is the Senior Editor, Political and Current Affairs, New Delhi, Television Limited, India. And V.R. Raman, National Convener, Public Health Resource Network. A very warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Now, I invite the moderator, Dr. Simi Mehta, to initiate the deliberation with her opening remarks, invite our esteemed speaker, and to proceed further. We look forward to learning from the esteemed gathering. Thank you.
Thank you, Karnika, and good evening, everyone. I am so delighted to be hosting today's IMPRI Web Policy Talk on disaster risk reduction in India, recent lessons and strategies for the future under the series, The State of the Environment, #Planet Talks. I'm elated that this topic of immense significance would be explained to us by none other than the expert himself, Professor Anil Gupta, and delved further by Mr. V.R. Raman and Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, who work so closely on the topic. We all know that India has been making a stellar progress in its development trajectory. The gains being equally distributed among the population remains far-fetched, although. What adds to the woes is the continuous incidences of natural and anthropogenic hazards, be it flooding, cyclones, droughts, wildfires, and also the looming biological and nuclear threats, etc. Hence, the question that persists is how to resolve these complexities. What are the policies and implementation strategies that should be adopted by India, given its unique geographical location? What is the status of India's disaster risk reduction under the priorities of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 30? What are the best practices that needs to be implemented in order to forge vigorously towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals? And lastly, how can India emerge as a global leader in the realm of disaster risk reduction? So to get clarity to some of these questions, I invite Professor Anil Gupta to make his presentation, after which our expert discussants will make their observations. So thank you so much, and Professor Gupta, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Simi and Dr. Arjun, for inviting me. And I'm very happy to join Mr. Raman and Mr. Himanshu Shekhar. You both are the learned colleagues and thinkers across boundaries, I would say, boundaries of disciplines, boundaries of geography, boundaries of the viewpoints also. And that, in fact, gives us a lot of leverage to have the transdisciplinary discourses. So thank you, IMPRI, for inviting me to share some of my thoughts and experience on the status of disaster risk reduction in India, and how do we start thinking about the future issues. And I think this discourse comes very at the correct time, because we are also celebrating this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and across all the sectors, we are looking at what has been our journey of the past, where are we in the present, and how do we look at the future roadmap. When we say future roadmap, I think it becomes equally or more important to start looking at the challenges also, because unless we identify and evaluate our risk, our journey remains little uncertain or more uncertain. So I'm using a PowerPoint presentation here. So thank you, Dr. Arjun, for supporting me and helping me in this PowerPoint. There are India is I would say that a country that is called a country in transition, because in many fronts we are even competing with the developed world, the developed counterparts, but on many fronts we are sometimes lagging behind even some of the developing nations also. And within country we have an undulating terrain. Undulating terrain means in some part of the world, some part of the country, we have so many good examples, but we also witness some failure examples or some deficits also. So let us begin with next, please. Dr. Arjun, yeah, thank you. So there are a couple of points at the beginning, because disaster management has now a long journey globally and in India also. And though disasters have been taking place in the historical times also, all the phases of history, and some or other way those have been managed also, with good lessons also, with bad lessons also, with devastating scenarios also. But a systemic approach to disaster management started some way in 1990s, when the United Nations declared a complete decade of from 1991 to 2000. That was the United Nations decade of natural disaster reduction. So that was very important, because some or other way the term disaster reduction that started there. However, the initial thought in disaster reduction was, I recall the title of the magazine that was being published by the International Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction, that is now called as UNDRR. Earlier it was called as ISDR. So they were publishing the magazine. The title was Stop Disasters. So that indicates that the thought process that the experts and the people who were working initially in disaster management, they were thinking that disasters can be stopped. However, that was a partial truth, not the full truth, because the emphasis was more on engineering related interventions to manage disasters. So like the terminology, like the hazard control and these kind of things were more in thought process. However, the midterm review gave an idea that not only the engineering centric approaches, but there are a lot of humanitarian and social dimensions that come into play, and those need to be brought at the central concept. And that's the reason the consideration of the gender issues, psychosocial issues, the community-based interventions, all this started during that decade itself. However, by the end of the decade, it was also realized that these disasters, most of the natural disasters, so-called natural disasters, are also associated with the environmental challenges. So it was also the period that on the lateral front, the awakening about the environmental degradation, awakening about the environmental conservation was also ongoing, and people had started discussing about the global warming also. So by the end of this decade, this issue was also brought to the notice of the international, the fraternity working on disaster management. And that is the reason the next phase, that was the Hugo Framework for Action on Disaster Risk Reduction. Hugo is a city in Japan. So the outcome of the second World Conference on DRR. So there, in fact, a number of priorities were identified, and the priority number 4 that is important to refer here, that was on addressing underlying causes of risk. So this is how the thought process from the relief and response centric approach to disaster management then started talking about risk reduction, and then further down the line resilience also. So how this priority 4 that was on addressing underlying risk was important, because many times we look at only the symptoms, like in the health sciences we talk of the symptoms, and we talk of the curative approach. But now there's a transformation, and there is a different thinking that we address to the prevention, and and then the prevention is better than cure kind of thing. So the same thing became then the priority 1 in the Sendai framework, where we are currently working. So Sendai framework, the priority 1 says the understanding disaster risk. So that's very interesting. After 40 years of journey, if we say that understanding disaster risk, some people will say that it means we didn't even understand the risk. But I think it is a reality, because now disaster risk is so dynamic, and a number of new components are being added with advancement of technology, with the changes in society. For example, during COVID, we realized when we were dealing with the implementation of the lockdown during the first wave, and then we realized that many of our cities are loaded with migrant workers, migrant population. Even one city I witnessed, the city of Surat, more than 12 lakh migrant workers were there. So these are the new dimensions to any kind of disasters, and sometimes we do not come to know in the beginning or during the course of disaster preparedness, and we come to know later. So how do we start understanding and anticipating these issues in advance? I think that becomes more important. So another aspect that the climate change is a reality, and with the 2007 the 4th assessment report, now we have the 6th assessment report also, but 4th assessment report in 2007 itself brought the awakening that water related disasters like floods, drought, cyclone, heat wave, cold wave, extreme events, cloud bursts, these events, their frequency and intensity is rising. And then it was an important advancement in understanding of disaster risk scenarios. And even in India also, India has a multi-hazard geography. In fact, India is excellent, I would say excellent research field for the world disaster management community, global community on disaster management, to understand risk, because we have all kind of disasters. We have all kind of hazards associated with disasters in some or other part of the country, except that we do not have any active volcano, but most of other disaster risk we inhabit. So that is important. But along with this, not only climate change, there are 2 other layers of environmental change that is also important in disaster management. One is land use issue. I think land use change, we already realized that we saw this the Kerala flood, before that the Chennai flood, then the Srinagar flood, Guwahati flood, and what we are witnessing, that most of such incidences affecting the urban areas. And these are the settings where land use changes have taken place very fast particularly over past 30 years. So how land use has emerged and as another layer of key environmental change. Besides that, the natural resource degradation has also contributed. So looking to this, the policies have also undergone a kind of shift globally, and we started from now the Sendai framework also talks about environmental issues. And as Dr. Simi was also referring to that, India, with a lot of experience of dealing with disasters, we also have the potential and also an ambition to support other countries, because when we have a lot of lessons, a lot of understanding, that it becomes the ethical responsibility, it becomes the humanitarian responsibility to support other countries by way of extending resources, by way of extending knowledge. And knowledge is the biggest power in disaster management also. So there is a huge potential that India to emerge as a global leader in disaster risk reduction. And along with that, it is also important that when we are developing our vision plan for future, for example, here at country level, we are talking about the 100 years of India's independence. So that is 2047. So 2047, when we were talking about what shall be our vision for 2047, I told that vision should not be prepared only by a limited number of people, but we need to involve different generations as well, because we are not going to be the leaders in disaster management in 2047. The next generation or the younger generation, they are going to lead us. So who are going to be the leader? I think we will start need to talk to them. So how do we have a more kind of a consultative and participatory approach in planning? I think that is important. Next, please. Just a listing of few examples which gave us tremendous lessons and tremendous understanding of disaster risk. Like India is a land which faced the biggest industrial tragedy of the world, Bhopal. Then Orissa cyclone. Now we set example because that is a benchmark, that when we had more than 10,000 of casualties, and now we are able to reduce the loss of life in a cyclone disaster. So that also sets a kind of a success of a journey in disaster management, that with effective early warning, what good level of success in cyclone tracking, the landfall and all kind of things, and then the local level preparedness, we have been able to reduce the risk of disasters, risk of casualties, risk of loss of life. And like Bhuj in his example, that always reminds that how earthquakes can be so devastating, and anyone who has some kind of a remembrance of the Bhuj earthquake would recall the kind of devastation and the loss of life, loss of infrastructure was there. And that gives us a lesson that how do we work on buildings, because it is not the earthquake that kills, it is the building that kills. And how do we integrate this into our planning and developmental issues. Indian Ocean tsunami, that is one of the key trigger factor for the bringing of the disaster management law in India. It was 2004 and 2005 we enacted our law. So Bhuj earthquake, then the Indian Ocean tsunami, and then that pushed a lot, and the act was placed in parliament and passed, and then became a law. Then Uttarakhand, entirely a different kind of scenario, because we have been witnessing a number of flash floods in Uttarakhand, but the 2013 Uttarakhand flood was termed as a Himalayan tsunami by some of the media houses, and because that was because of the size of the devastation that it brought. And it was not only just water, it was boulders, blocks, and the kind of damage it brought. It's really a kind of a traumatic event to think of the scenario that it presented. Kerala again, with Kerala flood presented a different scenario, that how do we manage our natural systems if we do not maintain the natural balance or the natural living of these water bodies are kind of things. So some or other way, with a little bit of the management issue, some kind of disasters can take place, because then the concept of environmental flow also started. So the issues like proactive planning, issues like the lack of preparedness at some places, the issues of sometimes lack of resources, and then overall it has emerged from the lessons of these disasters that disaster management is basically a developmental challenge. How do we manage our development? How do we redesign our development? How do we make a balance between the materialistic development or the infrastructure development with natural systems? I think these are very important aspects. And how do we integrate the various aspects of demographic challenges, like the vulnerable sections of society, the downtrodden sections of society, gender issues, children, elderly. I think these issues also emerge with these lessons of these disasters. Can we move to next, please? So we have been able to do significantly in the area of developing legal and institutional mechanism, but still there are new lessons, because every disaster brings some new understanding, and if that is used, we can evolve further. So now we have a dedicated disaster management law in India, but what happened with the dedicated disaster management law? Sometimes we missed out, and we started forgetting the specific hazard laws which are also existing. For example, there are laws existing related with industrial challenges. For example, gas cylinder rules, and for example, particular chemicals, insecticide laws. There are a number of laws, even Public Liability Insurance Act, even the forest related laws. So that is a sectoral law. So there are opportunities for looking into disaster management or disaster resilience provisions in our sectoral laws also. Like the forest regulations talks about landslides also, talks about the watersheds, basically that can help reduce the risk of the flash flood kind of things, erosion and siltation kind of issues which contribute to disasters. I think these are important issues. Now we are trying to start to integrate the provisions of these regulations also, which are otherwise not directly considered as disaster management laws. Besides that, we have been able to translate the international policies and national policies into our plans. But what now remains that we still have a long journey remaining to improve our local governance strengthening, local planning strengthening. And this is the right time, because we have the impact of the 73rd and 74th Amendment, and a lot of emphasis now on local level interventions. But there are a lot of challenges also with these local level initiatives. So how do we start looking at these local bodies? I think that is also a point of intervention and kind of a the point for thought process and the critical interventions. Next, please. So when we talk about that, how do we downscale our interventions, and how do we intensify the impact of policies in bringing the ground realities? What key issues that emerge to us are mostly related with capacities in terms of professional expertise, the competencies. For example, all the districts, now we want that all the districts should improve their disaster management plan by integrating climate change adaptation issues. And also now the lessons of COVID are also there. But where are the people to help at district level, and more particularly when we want these plannings to take place at block level, taluka level, the city level, and also at Gram Panchayat level. So I think these are the kind of challenges. Then what are the resources which are needed? And I think looking to these, that the kind of critical resources that are needed to not only respond during disasters, but effectively prepare. So human resources, material resources, technological resources. So I think looking to that, it also requires some kind of a revisit of our institutional structure. But at, for example, at district level, we have the district disaster management authority that is chaired by the district collector. But district collector have so many responsibilities, more than 150 responsibilities to chair. Then how do we have a dedicated system at district level? How do we have a dedicated system at the urban local body level to take care of these things round the clock, 365 days, so 364 days every day? So I think that is very important. So do we integrate with the operational kind of a control room kind of facility? But I think that is important topic that we are currently discussing in the country. Then there are a number of plans also, because number of centrally sponsored schemes. For example, people are preparing the climate change adaptation plan. Now some states like Uttar Pradesh, they are talking about such kind of planning at district level also. Now, recently we have prepared a national health adaptation plan, but for that also, now we want that these plans have to prepare at district level also, state level also. So, when there are number of plans being prepared at district level, if we look at the key stakeholder departments, there are a lot of commonalities. So looking at commonalities, how do we look at the co-benefits? I think that is important. And more particularly in terms of finance, because sometimes there are good plans, but finance presents a challenge. Then there are issues like accountability, that plans are there and those are to be implemented. What is the timeline? If those are not implemented, who is held accountable? And if someone is accountable, what are the actions? What are the remedies? I think these are the also important issues. Then besides that, there are also big questions. Like we say that this much of risk, that much of risk. What is the quantification of this risk? And how can we say that by such interventions, this risk can be brought down? So whether the risk was in a scale of 10, it was 9, or in a scale of 100, it was 40 or 60 or 70. So I think that is also important, that what is the level of risk? So I think there is a lot of research interventions are also important, policy research interventions for some kind of quantification. Recently, we have done some kind of pilot study for 4 cities, Guwahati, Visakhapatnam, Jaipur, and one more city. So developing some kind of a scorecard for risk and resilience. So I think these kind of things are important. Then currently thought process is that how do we integrate with the Gram Panchayat development plans? I think that is very, very important. There are a lot of discussions that how do we utilize Manrega and other kind of schemes in risk reduction interventions. So there are a lot of opportunities. Past 15 years or so, we have been talking about the private public-private partnership models, that the government, the corporate, and the community. But I think we do not have a very good number of excellent models, except a few. So how do we take this concept forward and make it more popular? I think there are challenges. CSR, again, a lot of discussions were there, that how do we utilize CSR opportunities for promoting disaster resilience activities. I think that is also an important area in our country to work upon. Then research has been a big gap. We have been able to do some work in training, but research is still a gap area. Beside that, databases. Even when we were working for cities, we found that there are huge data gaps. There is huge understanding also on the various quantitative mechanisms, database collection systems, and also maintaining a good database. I think that is very big challenge, because whenever a major disaster takes place, and if we have to conduct a damage assessment or an impact assessment of the disasters, we need to have the baseline data well in advance. So I think that is an important aspect. Beside that, a lot of capacity building interventions are being undertaken, but many things go in silos. For example, health-related the capacity building programs, and seldom health-related capacity building includes disaster-related issues until very recently. However, COVID has shown that how health is a forefront issue for disaster management also. Beside that, many of the disasters have health dimension. So similarly, when we want that the hospitals to provide their services during disasters, for example, floods, if the roads are washed away, how hospitals can remain functional? If the electricity supply is are disrupted, how health system can remain functional? So I think there are a lot of lessons to have integrated approach to capacity building. So I think these are the new issues. So though this subject is so vast, we can keep on discussing, and newer and newer lessons are there. But there are 4 or 5 the forefront issues at present, and those are more related with the ongoing disruptive transformation that we are witnessing. This disruptive transformation, what I am using this word disruption, because if we just look back 3 years back, the electric vehicles were kind of a surprise to all of us on the roads in India. But now we more often we see electric vehicles, even we are able to see electric scooters and these things. So technology is bringing a lot of change. Even the COVID has shown that all of us confined to our computers more, confined to our electronic gadgets more. So our life has also changed. Now people find more comfort in online discussions rather than physical meetings. And otherwise also, even physical meetings are there. Many of those are hybrid ones. So a lot of facilitation, but the more and more use of the electronics and the ICT, people moving towards advancement in robotics, nanotechnology, these kind of things. I think that we will also need to start looking that how our systems are going to be more automated. For example, in disasters or in the cities also, water supply system, the gas supply system, most of the deliveries, services, all are being managed in an automated system, and in future maybe controlled by the robotic system. So the future disasters are also going to be different than what we have been witnessing in the past and what we are witnessing in the present also. Besides that, we are also going to witness a great social transformation and great social settings also. More and more nuclear families. We are connected to each other. We are connected to our neighbors by maybe our telephone or by the electronic gadgets, but less in person. So I think our concepts in disaster management, our the response systems in disaster management, our cooperation strategies in disaster management would also need to undergo these kind of new adaptations to these kind of disruptive changes. So these are the new issues I think we will need to discuss. And I have already taken almost 30 to 35 minutes. And I think that this is a good time that we take the reflections from our other guest colleagues who are having a lot of expertise on this subject, and then we can take some questions also. So thank you, and over to Dr. Simi and Dr. Arjun for taking these questions. There are so many other things, but most of the things are related. This is a recent study that we carried out on how mortality has the different periods of the policy periods mortality. So we can scroll towards the other slides also, Arjunji. Yeah, so this is this is a new framework that we have recently suggested, that integrated framework planning concept. So we have a framework planning considering safety issues, environmental hazards, health issues, along with the disaster risk management. And I think that is very important lesson for the future, that COVID has also contributed to this. Next. These are the two recent publications from our side. And here also we have tried to cover that integrated risk assessment approach for COVID pandemic also. Next. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful presentation, and it really leads to a lot of thinking and a lot of important questions from in the minds of all of us. So I would not take much time, but I'd just like to invite Mr. V.R. Raman for his observations, and if I have the time, I would like to pose a few questions to you later on. Mr. V.R. Raman, over to you.
All right. Thanks, Professor Gupta, because what you have made, quite often when you are representing a government agency, it is not very easy to expect that you will be open about some of the weaknesses of the system, but appreciatedly you are able to see what all are the key issues that our overall, when we are moving towards risk reduction or resilience, what all are the key institutional and what all are the key structural issues that the country is facing, and then you are trying to suggest solutions for that. It's a very, very welcome way, and the disaster management, the National Institute definitely, gives us a promising, kind of way forward, because this is how we can get people on board. The moment we are saying we are doing wonderfully, we are doing wonderful for sure, but within our limitations, that limitations are something that we need to know well, so that we can address that gap. So I really liked that approach. And I would like to structure my, and also, you started with Bhopal, Odisha, Bhuj, and the, Indian Ocean tsunami, Uttarakhand, and the Kerala flood. I don't know what word what word will be better here, because I was somewhere on the forefront of all these disasters. So that is where my understanding of disaster, the importance of foreseeing, trying to reduce the risk, so reduction, the importance of that came to my mind because of first Bhopal, as part of the People Science Network. Then, when one of the annual general body meeting was happening in Bhubaneswar, that was the evening when the Odisha super cyclone hit the shores, and the place, the hotel Surya that we were staying, from there to from the relief work to rebuilding or reconstruction of the societal structures. That was my, I think, even Bhopal could not give me those lessons, but Orissa gave me that lesson, how the social structures are getting affected in a deeper manner. So thanks for bringing in all these together, and how these all episodes are giving us important lessons about the future. So that is how quite often these are seen as problems, these are seen as challenges, these are seen as bad days. But as a disaster risk reduction or disaster management point of view, we need to really go deeply into various challenges that we have faced at one point in time, and to pull out lessons one by one. And so I'm also trying to do something similar. So I will start with the pandemic, while discussing the issues. And also I like the usage, disruptive transformation. That is something very, very important, not only in the area of technology, also in institution, also in financing, also in various other areas. We need to really disrupt the ongoing debates and the ongoing the structural what we call stagnancy. That stagnancy needs to be really addressed by way of introducing innovative ways of thinking and operations in place of the very old and very conservative ideas of whether it is financing, whether it is human resources, whether it is institutional building, whether it is training, whether it is community participation and mobilization, whether it is any other area where we need to engage. So from pandemic, the recent COVID-19 pandemic, I was trying to list what all are the key lessons learned in a very nutshell, because time is much less. One is public health preparedness as a major important factor. Second is the how important it is to keep our public health systems ready to respond to any of the upcoming kind of issues. The third one is about research and development in the public sector. While our vaccine development and others, some of them are private initiated, whether it is Covaxin or many other kind of invention that came in. But one of the lessons, very important lessons that I see, is that our research and development in the public sector has a major role to play, because we are seeing the debate about good manufacturing practices and global recognitions and various issues coming up in front of us. So if this the public research and development sector is strengthened, probably we could have addressed these things much better, I think. And then Wash systems, how important are they? Laboratory strengthening, how important are those issues? And isolation quarantine facilities at rural level and also urban level. And finally, you have already listed the migrant labor issue in a very important manner, citing the examples of Surat and other cities. Then we have nutrition issues. Then we have the social welfare issues. So in a sense, financing of the development sector and financing of disaster are quite very similarly linked, and how we can get the financing tuned into disaster risk reduction and climate change or climate resilience is something that we need to think in a broader manner. That is the first point. The second point is the coastal areas of India. Specifically, we are having a lot of lessons, particularly the East Coast. West Coast is, there are some smaller kind of issues in the West Coast, but the larger issues we are facing in the East Coast, specifically the Bengal, Bay of Bengal, but Arabian Sea also we need to. So from that coastal triangle, how can we really look at that part? Wherein community preparedness and all that, education, all that. Simi, am I taking more time?
No. Please continue, sir.
All right. Yeah. So that is one thing. And from the flood and drought, it is all about ecological sensitivity in our. See, when we are talking, ecological romanticism comes in as a major overtone of our discussion. But ecological sensitivity somehow is missing. So how can we make the floods or drought, those similar situations, when we are into a land use pattern? You mentioned that quite importantly. So how can we look at the development paradigms? How can we juxtapose the ecology and development paradigm and choose the best thing both for the future of life and future of the ecology and ecosystem that we are leaving, and finally what you call overall disaster situation. If we can juxtapose these three and then pick up the better kind of choices of development, we can do a lot for that. Similarly, in the Kerala is also, because Kerala is like you told about India, we have all disaster models except for probably volcano. Kerala is also something like that. It has all the various geographies except some of them. So the Himalayan regions also has to look at this ecological footing, ecological sensitivity of that. So that is one thing. And of course, finally coming to the institutional part of it, we have a law, we have an intent. So where is the action, and how to strengthen the action on this is a major point to discuss. So financing disasters should also, because like we have a gender budgeting, like we have climate financing now, the climate financing should have the center of it should be disaster financing. If that happens, we can look at various sectors from the perspective of preparing them for. So Japan is a very, very interesting example for this, I guess, because many of the disasters that is happening, everyday kind of disaster, that country is able to stand and strive forward. So we need to probably look at financing this important issue, all sectors from this angle. And then strengthening local bodies came in your discussion importantly, but the linkages of the GPDP and disaster risk reduction is not a well-known factor. Whether it is urban local body or rural local body is something that and also the human resources. When it comes to human resources, financing human resources, we are very conservative, very, very conservative. We have a National Disaster Management Institute for sure where you are sitting, but at the state level, for a country like India, our institutional capacities for preparing the population is very, very limited. And the responsibilities that you people are shouldering is much more than a human society can shoulder, but you are there, some 10-20 people together taking that such huge burden. So how can our financing look at providing more human resources for this kind of an issue? It's a very futuristic and a very important kind of step. And this HR vacuum is to be what we do whenever we make a law or a new policy or whatever, we name some of the institutions. Like you said, the district collector is having hundreds of responsibilities. All the various people, we are not creating that agency very well connected with the realities of the district, but still able to do its functions independently. That kind of a strength is not there. We are expecting the same kind of people to do 1,000 types of functions. That is a major issue. That HR vacuum is something to address. And then research for DRR. So we need to have proper research, and I think crowdsourcing can be a major mechanism if we are able to methodologically adopt climate and disaster data. If we are able to pull the data from people whosoever has struggled with disasters and the realities of the disasters, how to crowdsource them using technologies in a proper fashion, and then make it as a reference like a disasterpedia or something like that, like Wikipedia. If we have references available across for smaller to the largest kind of disaster, I think that is where we need to prepare our future and prepare our population for. And the understanding that one of the underpinning thing is, I am sitting in Delhi, you are also sitting in Delhi, a place wherever, you also said about the Bhuj, buildings can kill people. We have examples and experiences of Nepal, which is not very far away. So how, the seismic zones that we are sitting on, how we are preparing our country, our people towards not only the mindset towards risk reduction, but also the infrastructure towards risk reduction, technology for risk reduction, financing for risk reduction, institutions for risk reduction, and overall an environment for risk reduction. That is what I'm looking for. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Raman sir. Very illuminating and quite interesting suggestions and points that you have posed. We will be joined by Himanshu Shekhar sir in a bit. He's just closing with the cabinet briefing that got delayed for a while. So, sir, if you permit, I would like to present some of my views also to you, and maybe then you could comment.
Yeah.
Sir, thank you, sir. So you really highlighted a lot of urgency towards improving and implementing DRR strategies for India, and it really speaks a lot, as Raman sir was mentioning, sitting in a government institution and speaking this really means volumes about it. You spoke about the gaps in policy research and the work that you are doing in terms of scorecards for risk and resilience. I feel that there has to be a lot of interactions between the government and the local players, and there should be a complete removal of the barriers of bureaucracy, because if we really need to be managing, if we really need to be managing and moving towards DRR and towards 2047, as you mentioned, I believe that any such barriers to such exchanges would be considered to be intentional, because there is a lot of times when the government only interacts with government bodies, and this is kind of a challenge wherein you simply rule out the interactions with the local players, the civil societies, where the innovations or where the real ideas lie. And as was mentioned by Raman sir in passing about India's neighbors, because when earthquakes, for example, hit Nepal or even Pakistan, the tremors are felt in the nearby states of India as well. And even the cyclones which hit the Bay of Bengal region, the implications are immense for our eastern states and also the places in Bangladesh. So I would like to know, is there a possibility of forging some kind of, a regional strategy? Because we are faced with similar vulnerabilities, and a regional cooperation or regional strategy for disaster risk reduction, what are the possibilities? And also, when you're talking about scorecards for some selected places that you mentioned, Jaipur, Visakhapatnam, etc. So smart cities framework is already there. So should we not amalgamate some kind of a DRR strategy within the smart city framework? And as there is a ranking in terms of Swachh Sarvekshan, etc., should there be a ranking in terms of DRR preparedness, which will also enable a lot of interest, and also maybe from the district administration, city administration, etc. So if you could take these and respond to what Mr. Raman had to say, it would be great, sir. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. In fact, Ramanji and you highlighted many points. Thank you for your agreement also on some of the points from my side, and you added some valid points. Ramanji, I totally agree that at local level, when we really want to see a transformation, because anything, it is the local realization or local transformation is very, very important. And the human resource that you touched upon, the human resource aspect, very important. Until unless we have the trained, dedicated also have some other responsibilities, then this job, I think that is very important. But we also have to see the kind of a limitations also. So at district level, maybe if we have some kind of a integrated control room kind of things. For example, if it is a meteorological information or climate weather information, that may be used for many purposes. So the fire related issues, I think the fire plays a role, firefighting system plays a role in case of disasters, also in case of other emergencies also. So if we have some kind of a integrated control room or this kind of facility, but certainly dedicated manpower has to be there to equip these systems. And also has to be made because people come and go more often, they are transferred, and if someone asks that what happened 3 years before, the people do not have the adequate information. And any future preparedness or any future planning also always requires a baseline information or the past experience also. It is to be built based on the past experience as well as the future projections. So very rightly you pointed out. And the point that Dr. Simi referred to, smart city aspect, I think that is very important. Some development has been there in integrating climate resilience issue or climate change adaptation issue in city planning. That our counterpart in Ministry of Urban Affairs, that is NIUA. I'm also associated with that initiative. So, but when it comes to measurement of disaster risk and resilience, as you referred to, that such survey is there, and but there is no such kind of surveillance or surveillance for disaster risk. The challenge has been that how to measure this risk. Actually, that is the real issue, because that is a highly dynamic kind of thing. So a disaster risk also varies on a number of geophysical factors, a number of technological factors. For example, building X, building Z, there are 10 buildings. All these 10 buildings may be vulnerable differently. Then within those buildings also, different set of people living. So if the women are vulnerable differently, male are vulnerable differently, if there are differently able people. So we have to work out some kind of mechanisms considering all these complexities, and that is the reason we tried to work out some kind of a scorecard. We can't say that is a perfect one, but some kind of beginning, just to showcase that yes, this is to be done, and this can be done, so that other research players also come forward, and if they can suggest even some kind of betterment to this, that would also be welcome. So a very valid point you have suggested, because a smart city should not be only smart in terms of the supply of goods and services, but it should be able to withstand the shocks and stresses also. I think that is important. If it should continue its supplies and services, even if there is a heavy rainfall or there's a heavy hailstorms kind of things, We have an example when because of the freezing temperature, the water supply system in Shimla got frozen for more than 30 hours. And the pipeline also got affected. So these kind of examples. Then during heat also, now heat wave has emerged in new kind of disasters. So every time new type of disasters are also emerging. COVID has emerged in a very different kind of disaster that we also call as black swan events. So this is also a new lesson, that some of the disaster risks that that are known to us. Some are the disaster risks that are known to us partly, but there are some disaster risks which may be which may not be known to us at all, like the pandemic has come. So when we are planning for our disaster risk management as a whole, we should have a scope for all kind of things. I'm telling you one thing. We had a meeting, disaster risk and resilience for food security system in India, and some of the member, although it was the idea appeared to be very alien, but I think it was a good point. Some of the member, he reflected that what happens and how do we manage our food security if the sun does not rise for 1 year. So people will say that no, how it is possible. But if we look back in the history, there are instances that in some of the smaller countries, sun did not rise for more than 90 days. So if it can happen for 90 days, it is also likely that it may not rise for 10 months or 6 months period, maybe because of the impact of some volcano, maybe because of the impact of some kind of a dust storm. So if we start digging into the possibilities, we'll find that what can really happen. And like we work in industry system, or we work in the financial risk system, we say that we try to anticipate what can go wrong. And we also should see that if something can go wrong, will go wrong. How it will go wrong and how would be able to contain it and reduce its impact, I think that is very important. So I think a number of points that you raised, a number of points that Mr. Raman raised, I think very important insights, and that really supplement and to what is the real thought process towards a disaster resilient India in 2047, when we say 100 years of disaster resilience. So that is important. Yeah.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. We have Professor Mizan Khan, who is joining from ICAD Dhaka, and he wants responses from you on a few questions as to how disaster risk reduction financing can be enhanced at local, regional, and national, and even international levels. And another question by him is how can we align social protection schemes or safety nets with DRR for enhancing the resilience? Your comments, sir?
Can you just repeat the first question?
First is, how can DRR financing be enhanced at local, regional, national, and international levels?
See, Dr. Simi, one is that I totally agree that we should have a strong financial mechanism for DRR. But what we have seen, sometimes we do not even initiate our actions just by saying the DRR finance mechanisms are weak. Actually, basically, we will need to do some effective mapping of the financing opportunities. Like in India, we have done a good development very recently, 2020. We had this NDRF and SDRF, National Disaster Response Fund and National State Disaster Response Fund. But the money here was available. Our money was the use of money was permitted only for disaster rescue, relief, and post-disaster interventions kind of things. Now it has been renamed as National Disaster Response and Mitigation Fund, and similarly State Disaster Response and Mitigation Fund. So SDRMF is basically the kitty for states with the money already available with the state, and NDRF, basically the NDRMF, the money has to be requested by the states from the national funding pool. So this is a good initiative. that now money can be spent for capacity building also, in procuring equipments also, in preparedness, is strengthening early warning also. So I think this is a good development. But this is not the only funding window. Besides that, like India, many other countries also have come up with some provision like Flexi Fund. We say that all the project funds, for example, if a project funding is worth 100 crores, the 25% of that fund can be utilized for the resilience building purposes, the disaster risk reduction purposes. Now, basically, we will have to work out a detailed mechanisms that how each district uses this money. So many times we find this example that money is there, money remains unspent because of the lack of competence in people, or lack of the people basically who can really make the plans, like Raman Saab was referring, that we do not have people. So who will make the plan to utilize this money, because that also requires technical competence, that also requires a lot of management skills, that how to prepare a proposal and then how to manage the implementation also. Because if other department people are engaged into this, they have other jobs to do. So I think that is an issue. Besides that, COVID has also shown that it has a multifarious interest for business people in business or people in corporate. Like we have been talking about the CSR CSR as an investment for DRR, but not only CSR. The disaster management is also appearing as a business opportunity. We were not manufacturing in India like masks and PPE kits and so many other things. Now a number of startups have come in the country. So I think that is also a lateral financing mechanism. Now, one area that is really very important, that is the insurance system. That how we promote insurance, and maybe insurance by any way. But many people would feel surprised that in India there are companies which are offering, and the provisions are there for to get your building or your house insured. But how many of us are actually utilizing it? That is also important. So we need to spread this awareness and encourage people to get their property also insured, and the provision of the damage by disaster may also be included in that. So I think whatever provisions are there, those need to be further strengthened. But whatever provisions are already available, we need to promote their implementation. There has also been issues that whether the government should take the insurance on behalf of people like the public liability insurance sector in case of industry. So there are different opinions, because in that case the direct transfer to the victim or affected, I think sometimes that works better. So I think there are different opinions, because sometimes the getting the money from the insurance agency, it may take a little longer time. So I think there are different views, but I totally agree that the financing mechanism at local level need to be strengthened more. So whether the municipalities or the urban local bodies, we should have some, we should encourage them to create their own kitty, that in case of such eventuality, they have earmarked some money, they have some money saved to deal with these kind of situations, so they can withstand that situation. So, but very important aspect. And second is social protection. I think in this area, India has really done some good work over past decade or so. But certainly there are large number of people still to be brought under the ambit of beneficiaries, and to be made aware to take the benefits of these schemes. And then schemes should also be made, need to be made the risk proof. I think that is also important. Again, I will go back to Kerala. Kerala had certain example that how Manrega, they have transformed Manrega, partly they have converted to urban Manrega, although primarily it is for rural. But since Kerala is a different setting, but that is a good example for other states also, that how Manrega can be utilized for resilience building activities. are the climate change adaptation related activities. So not only Manrega also where we can look. Certainly Manrega is one of the biggest scheme, in fact, in the world, the largest employment support scheme in the world. So there are opportunities to promote social protection. I think that is very important. And for that, some kind of mapping is also important. Like while I was using my PowerPoint, I referred to migrant population. So similarly, most of the cities, we have a huge number of people living in the peri-urban areas. Who are the areas, who are the people, from where they have come, what is that demographic constitution, what is the age of the children there, and particularly what is the vulnerability of the girl child of this population, and how many of those are under the poverty line, because their Aadhaar card and other things would be of their native place, may not be of that area, or maybe they are not included in the voter list. But in case of disasters, the disaster does not distinguish between a person having a Aadhaar card from this place or that place. If you are geographically located, you are going to be affected by that. And that was the case in the case of COVID also. So I think we will have to start looking at these kind of demographic issues also. Yeah. Over to you, Simi.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you, sir. So there's a question by Vivek Negi on how far is. Yes, certainly, sir. Certainly.
One thing, Professor Gupta made very important remarks, but one, it is just a, what you call additional, footing to that is in all disasters, who is the most affected, who is the most vulnerable. Even if there is the example that you told is correct, because while at one level we are saying that financing is insufficient, but whatever financing is available, our capacity to utilize that itself is a big question. So even to the capacities to utilize the existing money, because I was also in government for a considerable time. So I've seen that in a very close manner that despite as a department head, my own wishes, my department was not able to do some of those things. So that was very clearly there. So, but more worryingly, you told about the Aadhaar card and lack of Aadhaar card in the same address, or lack of identity method. So most vulnerable sections of the society, how can we benefit them? How can we ensure their kind of problems are addressed using the existing pool of resources? How to ensure risk pooling for those kinds of population? So that kind of leaving no one behind kind of an approach needs to be added to the existing financial mechanism, and then we should try for enhancing that in a way that enhancement is also resulting in a proper utilization of the larger amount, rather than spending a lower proportion of it to say that this additional financing was not at all needed. So this the angle of equity and inclusion, leaving no one behind, is the point that I wanted to add there. Thank you.
Right, sir. When you say leaving no one behind, we definitely have to strengthen, I believe, strengthen the disaster risk governance, especially in the far-flung areas, which receive very negligible attention, but they really stand at a risk of high, they are more disaster risk prone. So that perhaps needs serious attention. So thank you, sir, for bringing that in. My question, I would be just reading out Vivek Negi's question, Gupta sir, about how far is India from participation of communities to local disaster planning, so that local knowledge complements scientific knowledge. Basically, question revolving around indigenous knowledge and emphasis on a bottom-up approach. Sir, over to you.
Hello. Yeah. So,
yes, sir.
So here I would say that I totally agree. I totally agree with this, that what it emerges, that capacity building appears to be, I think, one of the very, very important thing. Then relooking at the institutional mechanisms. And third is that we need to relook at planning process also. Because what happens that over the time, the legal and other provisions sometimes there are controversies within that. Many times these the kind of a new lessons, those are very easily integrated into national level process, but their percolation down the line, I think, is sometimes more important. And for this, we will need to work together, and we will need to create better improved models also. So though it is the primary responsibility of the government, but disaster management, a paradigm shift on ground cannot be brought alone by the government. It is a like sabka saath sabka vikas. So when we say that leaving no one behind, so it is a vice versa also. Basically, we will have to involve all the sectors in creating resilience also. It is not only the protecting all the people from disaster, that is equally important, but involving all of them in planning process. In fact, I saw a question also in the Q&A box relating with that, a participatory planning approach. So in fact, recently we have been working for developing national disaster management plan for certain ministries, sectoral basis, like Ministry of Agriculture and this. So when we are preparing for Ministry of Agriculture, ultimately it should be the protection of farmers. So we made sure that the inputs from all the sectors of society, directly or indirectly associated with the agriculture sector, and being affected by the loss in agriculture, is taken. So similarly, when we are working for the disaster management plan, a national disaster management plan for chemicals and petrochemical sector, we are involving industry also. So I think that is very important. So all-inclusive approach is fundamental. That I totally agree. But how do we do that? Talking is always easy. Doing is sometimes not that easy. So that is also thing that what is the way for involving. So now we are involving community representatives also, or the NGOs also, while we are reviewing these plans and improving these plans, particularly at district level. So when we worked and came up with a new model that we call as Gorakhpur model for district level disaster management plan. There what we did, we also took the community voices. So community voices not only for their vulnerability, many times the community members, they give us excellent ideas also, and lot of traditional wisdom is also there, because we may be outsider, but the people who are facing these challenges, they are facing for a long time, and while they face long time, they evolve some local mechanisms also. So I think that is also important to integrate local knowledge, local mechanisms, local innovations also in disaster management. So I think these are very important areas, and we should certainly work together to improve upon this process. And in fact, our Prime Minister has also referred, if we look at the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda, even he has referred the point number 6 of the PM agenda. He has said that promote women leadership in disaster management. So not only participation, he has talked even one step ahead, that when we really want community-based interventions, the women members, they can serve as a leader. But again, talking is very easy, doing is not that easy. So how do we really create demonstrable examples? And if there are demonstrable examples, so what we are also trying time to time, we are also trying to compile these good case studies so that they can be used for our capacity building interventions, for our training programs, generating awareness, because these set good examples for others also. So thank you, and over to you, Dr. Simi.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, I would like to ask this question to Raman, sir, about sensitization to the common people on DRR. would you subscribe to the idea that there could be a curricular rejuvenation at the school level, which could start very young, which could train the students and make them more aware, vigilant, and also more responsive towards any such disasters, anthropogenic or natural. Perhaps we might also see some kind of an organic yet innovative solutions or ideas that could come out from them, because again, going back to what Gupta sir mentioned, that we are moving towards 2047 and our focus should be to the younger generation, the next generation. So
the idea is something that it is well experimented and found to be very useful across the globe, that students, specifically children, if they are put into some specific understanding of the issues and culture of responding, they are very good. But when it comes to risk reduction, more importantly, because one is an institutional setting, all the training will happen in that institutional setting, but there is a community setting and the reality of life also. So what we need is a comprehensive kind of understanding of bringing, like Dr. Gupta said, all various kinds of populations need to be educated, but children can be having a larger focus with a curricula and an approach. But the problem is, in India, we are in an era we are talking about child-friendly education and all that, but education becomes a joyless, what you call undigestible element for children. We all are coming out of that factory as products of having some degree or something like that, or certificates. Beyond that, how can we involve children into those activities, building the joy in their heart about this is what we are doing, this is something important. That kind of feeling is must when we are engaging with children. That is the only add that I make. But at the community level, I'll tell you, when the Orissa super cyclone happened at the later part of 90s, this village level social reconstruction campaign was undertaken with Orissa government and local communities, panchayats, at the center. So in this process, it was quite very, it was clearly build the, evidence and possibility that it is not very difficult to take the community along when they have once realized the difficulty. Even without that, it was it's not that difficult. And if you go to, so we had worked with more than 1,000 panchayats in Orissa at that point in time, and all panchayats were able to come up with a resilience plan at that point in time, and everyone from kind of small kids to whosoever can understand what people are saying, to the age-old populations were involved in that process, particularly those who were more vulnerable to the situation. Including, at that point, I don't know whether you can even imagine right now we are talking about heat strokes. Immediately after the super cyclone, one of the major problems that people were about to face was heat stroke. So there was a program called Mapping Heat Stroke and Community Level preparedness for that, including hydration and various other processes that people have to do. So I was quite amazed. When we were planning that activity with UNDP and with the state government, we were not at all confident about the success of it. But when we saw the result of it, at that, in that particular year, the overall problems related to heat stroke, the challenges related to heat stroke was almost, what you call negligible compared to the previous year's data, whichever was available. Similarly, in Kerala, the first flood, Kerala is having that continuous August and September months are, having that alarm in Kerala now because of various factors. Now, after the first flood in Kerala, when the community level planning took place in all panchayats, wherein they included in the panchayat development planning, they included disaster mitigation into that, risk mitigation into that process. So they knew that most vulnerable people, where are they living, what all are the things to be done, what is the kind of volunteer force needs to be there, what is the kind of training to be given. So in the second year, when the review was happening after the Wayanad flood that was happening, all UN agencies were there and I was one of the participants over there. At that time, it was quite clear, and Sphere India was also part of that group. So we all were listening to people how they figured out the root of the problem, how various people, including those who are not in the power in politics, in any of those in the social margins, they came up to take forward the mission. How various lessons help them to prepare what all are the key things to be kept ready before there is a possibility of a longer rain and related issues. So all that was quite. So what I'm saying is the idea of working with the community and preparing them, and getting the youth too, because quite often there is a hue and cry about our new generation that they are into some, they are not socially committed, etc., etc. But what I have seen in all these locations is that the new generation is quite ready to come up with new technologies and various other things. At least in 7 or 8 recent occasions of social disasters and also other disasters, I am seeing that the young generations, including during the COVID support initiatives, with technologies and with other kind of measures, they are quite ready to come in. It's all about knowing their language and idiom and to tell them what to do. So if that kind of a momentum is created, I think this is feasible. Yeah, thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, there is some connection issues with Himanshu, sir. He joined some time back, but he had to log out. I don't know, some issues. So I would like to now come to towards the closing of the session. Sir, I would like to invite Anil Gupta, sir, for his closing comments. Briefly, sir, if you have any.
Thank you, Dr. Simi and
Yes.
Dr. Arjun and Dr. Ramanji. I really wanted Himanshu to join, but as we
he joined and he then got off.
Sometimes it happens. These are the
yes, sir.
Challenges with the online, though online has a lot of benefits also.
Benefits.
We can join from, but anyway, this has been a good opportunity to talk about. So basically, we can say it was a kind of a rapid audit of the disaster management journey in India. So as Dr. Raman reflected in the beginning, that being in the government or something. So I agree, but this is also important for the all in the government also to keep on introspecting our journey. Although it is also very important that we develop confidence in whatever we have done and we have achieved, because that gives some encouragement also. But what happens that one is that perceptive or the perceived benefit, and one is the realistic benefit or realistic impacts. So what is the real impact, that also we need to understand, because like disaster management is highly multidisciplinary, multi-dynamic, and it is not always very easy to compose a holistic view of disaster or disaster impact, covering all the important sectors. Sometimes we miss out something, and then later we find that yes, it was also an important one. Similarly, when we look at the vulnerability side, so vulnerability side also, like when Dr. Raman reflected that the most affected people. So that also usually we consider that the people who are poor, people marginalized, yes, they are the people most vulnerable. But sometimes that definition may also change in a different context. For example, now we have a very strong understanding and realization that I think recent 10 years, the trend is different. The 10 years before, there was huge loss of life in most of the disasters. Now with advancement in early warning and local level preparedness, the things are better. But now there's a more damage to property, there's more damage to economic assets, and that way the people are affected. So if we see a literal kind of a realization that the people having more assets at home or with them, but because of the low capacities occupying a low-lying area or hazardous area, like what happens, the people who move from villages and rural areas for want of better life in cities, they have higher aspirations. They get some job partly or fully. They acquire more assets, and but they do not have that capacity to occupy a safer housing. So they are bound to live in a cheaper area and a low-lying area, which is often flood affected, or having the challenge of water sanitation, these kind of issues. So even the vulnerability context is also changing at times. So always there is a new lesson. So that is the reason we always have to keep our eyes open and open to new ideas, new understanding, new lessons, and then only we will improve. And not only we need to improve, we also need to withstand in the face of new disasters. I think this COVID has taught us that we should never be overconfident that yes, we learned so much, we did so much, and we will be able to manage everything. No, disasters are again so notorious thing. Every time it comes with a new face, and we think, oh, we missed out this, and that has affected. So this discussion today has been really a great learning for all of us, and the kind of questions also posed by some of the audience was very, very, very interesting and very useful for all of us. So thank you to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Raman sir, would you just like to add or conclude whatever
Only,
you would want to?
I would like to do just a single sentence, which is already highlighted by Professor Gupta. This is about creating that institutional memory about what we actually have done and what we could not do, what is missed out. We are able to really underscore that and keep that in our institutional memory, and then add that ingredient into our next level of preparation. That is what the future is requiring. Future is requiring lessons from the past, building on the past. So if we are able to building on the past, we can reduce the challenges of the future and probably make it better. Thank you.
Right. That clearly connects it to what Professor Gupta had to say towards the end. Disaster keeps changing, the face keeps changing, and that's what you connected it to. So brilliant. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much to Professor Gupta and Mr. V.R. Raman. It was truly fruitful, and we really learned a lot. Thank you very much again. I would like to invite Karnika to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of all of us. Karnika, over to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, vote of thanks.
As we come to the end of this extremely enlightening session, I, Karnika, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to formally propose a vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, Center for Environment, Climate Change and Sustainable Development. We are grateful to Professor Anil K. Gupta for taking part in the session. We thank our moderator, Dr. Simi Mehta, for deliberating the session. We also thank our discussant, V.R. Raman, for adding his diverse perspectives and valuable insights into the deliberation. And of course, we thank all our participants here on Zoom or on Facebook Live for participating and raising pertinent questions. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our podcast. I hope that you continue to tune into our future IMPRI #Web Policy Talks. Thank you once again, and I wish you all a very good evening.